You can follow us on YouTube. Drop your comment there. Let us know what you think, or the number 0709 60 25 62. But let's get to the guests. Then I give you a bit of context of where our conversation will be. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sally, the Dean at the School of Women and Gender Affairs. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers.
Happy Labor Day.
Thank you.
Is there anything to celebrate about Labor Day?
Yeah, I mean, we've been taking stock with regard to what has happened with regard to work. And there was a lot to celebrate today, but also the fact that the workers got a time to take a break.
Okay.
Yes.
Next to the professor is Mr. Andrew Mwenda, the CEO of the Independent magazine, old man of the clan, 110 years old.
111 now.
111.
Yes.
That's October, Andrew.
No, I was born 3rd October 1912, so I'm turning 112 years in October this year.
Good evening.
You avoided my 111th birthday last year. See, that's the problem with you great-grandchildren of these days.
But I called you before that.
No.
Then you told me it was in October.
No. It's in October 3rd. Last year I turned
this year it's 112.
Yes.
Good evening, and how are you?
I am very tired. I have driven all the way from Fort Portal. Dombo here is my grandson with the sirens and the police. They kicked me off the road. I fell off in the ditch. I had to go into the mud, repair my car, my jalopy of a car to come. So I am a victim of the power NRM officials exercise.
On the road.
On the road.
Anything to celebrate with the Labor Day today?
I think that is what we shall be discussing, whether labor in Uganda should be very happy.
Next to Andrew is making his maiden appearance on our show, Mr. Willis Bashasha, the Director of the Manifesto Implementation Unit. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, Timothy, and good evening to your viewers.
The owner of the Manifesto will be coming to you in a short while to explain where we are. And next to him is Julius Mukunda, the Executive Director of CS Bank. Good evening, sir, and how are you?
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers.
From the civil society, Labor Day today, anything to take home?
No, there is a figure which says that a Ugandan child born today would be 38% productive in their lifetime. So I'm beginning to wonder how we can really improve labor productivity in this country.
Interesting. Lastly but not least, Honorable Emmanuel Lumala Dombo, the Director of Communication at the National Resistance Movement. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, our viewers. Good evening, my colleagues, the panelists. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And I congratulate the workers of Uganda.
Thank you.
Those that are aspiring to get the jobs. The NRM is trying to secure your future by getting more jobs. Those who have gotten them, do them responsibly so that there is value for money for the owners, but also there is benefit to you as a worker.
Thank you very much. The NRM Manifesto of 2021-2026 stands on 5 thematic areas there. And these are creating jobs and wealth, delivering education, health, and water, ensuring justice and equity, protecting life and property, achieving economic and political integration. And the score they gave themselves was 35%, and they said 44% is on course and 19% nothing has been done there. They also say the challenges they have received are lack of land. Also, they talk about inadequate funds for development. They go on to say the debt and corruption are on top of the list on why they're falling short. But also looking at 2025 will be the beginning of the electoral cycle. How much can they achieve? Can they hit 80 to 90%? Let us know what you think. Let me start with the custodian of this manifesto. Mr. Willis, when we look at this manifesto, what is its status?
Thank you very much, Timothy. Like you rightly said, recently we had a midterm review, which was meant to look at the performance of this manifesto. And the statistics are showing that 35% is what we are able to achieve. 46% is work in progress, and 19% is those areas which have not been touched at all. Now, that gives the status in terms of performance. So I can say that 2.5 years down the road, we still probably, if we are to move a normal trend analysis, we'll probably be talking of over 50%. But unfortunately, this is where we are, and that is the status.
So when you look at your indicators, when I look at some of these things, creating jobs and wealth is at about 31%. Education, health is the highest with 44%. Justice and equity at 34%. Protection of life and prosperity is at 37%. Then the economy and political integration at a whopping 20%. What performance indicators did you use here? But also, when you were tracking this, are you tracking output? Are you tracking outcomes, impact? What are you really tracking?
The manifesto basically is an output document. So when we are tracking, the assessment we do is to look at the different interventions that were proposed to meet those thematic areas that you have highlighted, and then how we have been able to perform on them. So this is an output assessment and not an impact assessment.
So generally, if a school was meant to be put somewhere, you don't care whether they are teachers or students, the school is there?
No, because in the manifesto we pledged that we shall put a school there. So the moment the school is put there, for us we put a tick.
The impact is not your business?
The impact is not for now. It's not that it is not our business, but at the moment is that what was the mind of the crafters of the manifesto is that we had witnessed that probably there is absence of a school here, and therefore the school is there. But of course, along the way, this would mean that the presence of a school will demand other services, like presence of teachers. Even when teachers come, they would need accommodation. So these are areas that are considered later. But in the moment is that the focus was on the output as pledged in the manifesto.
Let me come to Andrew. Andrew, when you hear the NRM has been here 38 years, 6 manifestos, this being there, modern democracies, are they tangible? And when you look at this manifesto, which is majorly hinged on PDM, does it make sense? And is it secure in the future?
Well, let me frame it like this, Timothy. Let's look at the big picture. One of the pillars of the manifesto, which is also a pillar in the budget and also in PDM and also in the National Development Plan, NDP 3, is industrialization. Why is industrialization important? Industrialization is important because development takes place in the context of international trade. If your country is not trading internationally, it will look at North Korea or Cuba, it cannot grow rich. So development takes place in the context of international trade. Now, international trade is a value chain. Some countries will produce cotton, others will weave and knit cloth, others will market high fashion. How much you earn from international trade, therefore, depends on your position in that value chain. If you produce and export raw cotton, you will earn about 2 to 3% of the international market price. If you make cloth, you are likely to earn about 17 to 20%. If you market high fashion, Hugo Boss, Louis Vuitton, Prada, international market price. So if you produce and export cotton and 3% of the international market price, you are a highly indebted poor country called Uganda. If you make cloth, you earn 20% of the international market price, you are a middle income country like Mauritius. But if you market high fashion like Dolce & Gabbana and Louis Vuitton, you are an advanced economy like France and Italy. So the process of development is actually a process of upgrading from low production and export of low value products to high value products. So that is the global the context of development. Now we come to the case study of Uganda. We studied in primary school that the cotton seeds were introduced in Uganda in 1903 by a man called B.K. Barap, something like that. 120 years later, Uganda is still exporting largely raw cotton. I'll give you a good example. In 2019, Uganda produced 200,000 bales of cotton. We exported 190,000 and earned $50 million. We have 2 spinning companies in Uganda, Fine Spinners and Night Hill.
Yes.
they converted only 9,000 or 10,000, let me say 10,000 bales of cotton into cloth. They earned $50 million. So 1/20th earned the same value as
10,000.
You see, no, 10,000 and the same value as 180,000. I want to ask Bashasha here, I want to ask my grandson Dombo there, I want to ask President Yoweri Museveni, he's watching, because I have discussed this thing with him severally. Why doesn't Uganda learn a lesson that it needs to export finished cloth? And what policies have you put in place to ensure that our cotton is not exported raw, it is value added? And then once we begin adding value, we can also think of now creating our own designer brands. Some countries in the international market produce iron ore, others, some countries mine iron ore, others make steel, others market automobiles. How much again you earn depends on your position in that value chain. Where do we stand on every single product? Because Uganda has a very weak, if not absent, industrial policy to encourage the development of domestic industry. So I'll come to the second problem I see with the Ugandan strategy towards its development process. Over-reliance on foreign investment, foreign direct investment. The example I have already given you, if you listen to President Yoweri Museveni, he's permanently saying, oh, my foreign investor, my foreign investors, my foreign investors. Foreign investment is very good, I agree with the president. It creates jobs, it brings new technology, it produces capital, it brings skills, technical skills, even managerial skills, and even organizational forms, all of which are assets. But here is there are two problems with the, or let me say three problems with the foreign direct investment as a vehicle for national transformation. First, as a rule, multinational companies do not transfer the most innovative components of their business to their subsidiaries. Apple, if you look at this phone, I'm using an Apple phone here, 64% of the value of this phone is design and marketing. So they may mine coltan from Congo, maybe its contribution here is 2% of the price of this phone. But the design and marketing will take 64%. Then the microchips that come from Taiwan or China, because this phone is assembled in China, China takes between 17 to 20% of the value of this phone. So essentially, you must be at the cutting edge of this technology. So why is foreign direct investment a poor vehicle for us to upgrade from poor countries to advanced countries? Because as a rule, multinational companies do not transfer the most innovative components of their business to their subsidiaries. Apple is not going to design the iPhone from here. It is going to design it from California. The best we can do is maybe assemble this phone, which will give us 15 to 20% of the value. So where is our plan to design smartphones? That is the challenge. Because if you are relying on foreign direct investment, they are not going to do this for you. So what countries like Korea and Japan did, and you can see they have Toyota, they have Hyundai, they have Kia, they used foreign direct investment to partner with domestic investment, international foreign direct investment with domestic investment, and take a minority shareholding of 20%. They use that 20%, they leverage it to acquire technology. So you have technology transfer. Ask, what is our strategy in Uganda for technology transfer? We have Chinese building every single road. In Kampala, we have roads, KCC has given out contracts, roads of just 800 meters. That is 6th Street and 7th Street in industrial area, 1 kilometer. It's given to the Chinese. I was in Kasese the other day, they're doing municipal roads. The street in the municipality is 800 meters, 1.5 kilometers. It's being built by the Chinese. When will you build your capacity? These Chinese, we are giving you contracts to build small dams, dispensaries, little schools. My brother Dom, what are the requirements for local content, for transfer of technology, transfer of skills? So essentially, most of the money we are getting, we borrow money, it remains in China. The Chinese send here cement, they send steel, they do everything. Then the only Ugandans they hire are those who earn 150,000 shillings a month. We are on Labor Day. Are your workers earning much? Because you need workers to be of high skill, earning good money. So I think that what NRM needs to do now, as they campaign for 2026, and I'm sure they are going to win because they think the opposition in Uganda is another hell of a disaster, is to seriously think of how we can support Ugandan entrepreneurs, that every foreign investor who comes here must be leveraged to transfer technology, to transfer skills, to transfer capital. In fact, all foreign direct investment must be used to build Ugandan enterprises. And let me tell you, you have a very good example. We have done it in oil. If you go and see what PAO, Petroleum Authority of Uganda, have done, for you to be a foreign investor in the oil sector, there are so many requirements on you. They want to see that you are supporting the development of local enterprise in the oil sector, that you are partnering with them, that you are giving them substantial work to do, that you are transferring technology, you are transferring skills, you are transferring everything to local enterprises. So there is a component called local enterprise development. What we have done in oil, we should do next PDM, rather what, not PDM, National Development Plan 4, which is being written now, it must emphasize that really the criteria for you to get a contract to build a bridge, a road, a dam, you must show us your plan, and we must supervise you consistently to see how much local capacity you have created. Otherwise, Uganda has had the 11th fastest growing economy in the entire world over the last 38 years. 11th fastest growing. And I think this is an incredible achievement because Uganda has been located in a bad neighborhood. You have Congo, a collapsed state. South Sudan, a collapsed state. For the first 10 years, Rwanda was a collapsed state, malfunctioning. Kenya was not growing the economy. So we have been in a very bad neighborhood. In spite of that, Uganda has grown impressively well. How come this growth has not transformed into the social transformation of society? It's because most of the value that is created domestically gets repatriated to its home countries. So there is no retention to create the rate multiplier effect to transform this country. And I think that's why NRM has significantly failed. It's not that they have, yes, good macroeconomic policy framework, they have good ensured security, but they have not, those are the broad macroeconomic things. They have not gone into microeconomic policies that target particular sectors and say we want to go into electronics, textiles, and let's say food processing. These are going to be the sectors where we're going to focus, industrialize, and create a multidimensional conspiracy in favor of our transformation.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Professor, let me come to you. Hearing Bashasha and hearing Andrew, especially giving us the perspective of the globe, 35% is the performance. You as a professor or just in school, it would be an F9 there. When you look at this performance, does it translate to an ordinary Ugandan? And does it answer the pressing needs of any Ugandan to secure their future?
Yeah, thank you very much, Timothy. I think, I don't know that I would call it 35%, but anyway, that is what Andrew gave. I wouldn't say it's 35%.
It's NRM that gave it.
It's, they gave themselves the marks.
No,
It's in this document, the Implementation Monitoring Unit produced a report on how...
The midterm review report?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow, okay.
Summary report for the midterm review, findings of the NRM Manifesto. It's themselves awarding themselves marks. Really, they are the most transparent organization I know. Others have tried to read.
I think they are trying to be modest so that as we go forward, we continue improving. But there have been some attempts to do something. For example, and you're talking about it translating to the lowest person. And if you talk about the lowest people as being the lowest earners, there have been attempts there. You know, you talk about the youth livelihood programs, the Uganda Women Entrepreneur programs, you have the GROW project, and all these are designed to increase household incomes and improve the productivity. At least like the women's programs, they have been designed to improve the productivity of women, improve livelihoods, like household incomes, and also to make sure that they reduce income inequality. So at primary level, that would be good. The challenge now meets what Andrew is saying, because the way they are operating, although they are improving productivity, they are likely to remain small. You know, small and medium enterprises, but these are likely to remain small, because at the end of the day, what are they all working in? They are all in crafts. They are all in agricultural products. Either you grow mushrooms and then you dry them, then you're growing chickens, then you're growing turkeys, then maybe you're making baskets, you're making mats, you're making cookies. So there is a level at which our people have got stuck. And of course, Andrew talks about big things in terms of industry, and those are needed at national level. But if we had maybe an industrialization policy, then we would ask, what does it need to move from this level of always remaining small scale and dying within the first 5 years? Okay, many enterprises, small ones, don't go beyond the first year. But if they survive the first year, they don't survive the 5th year. So if we, and you see, I think when you tease this matter early more, then you realize that actually there's no industrialization to pick them up, okay? So even what you'd have as the big bakeries, they're all remaining small scale. The textiles, as he has said, even when they are here, it is good income, but largely they are seamstresses and they are putting things together. So it's not the real innovation he's talking about. So we need an industrial base to enable people coming from this level of small-scale producers to higher level. Because at the end of the day, if they don't add value, they will lack markets. And if they're all producing the same thing, and they're all in perishables, then there will be a problem. But what the GROW project is trying to do, for example, if what they intend to do with PSFU go through, is to try and put some level of infrastructure where these things will be processed. And I know they are trying to map the whole country now to see where the women's groups, what are they producing and how will they benefit from the facility. But the facilities are yet to be constructed and they are yet to be benefited from. So right now, it is simply giving skills to produce, and of course some of them are graduating as people who can manage farm equipment. They are graduating in terms of people who can produce agricultural produce. But when they all produce the same agricultural produce and there's no market, then it all goes to waste. So there are attempts to reach the lower level in terms of raising household incomes. But it still remains small scale because the people in the same ecosystem are all doing the same thing. So at the end of the day, there's not much in terms of buying and reinforcing each other. So you need a bigger economy to buy from them at reasonable prices so that they can improve the kind of livelihoods. Otherwise, they just end there. But of course, as they are doing that, one thing we should also not remember is what else is happening in that ecosystem for the small income earners. As they're trying to do that, they are losing land in terms of either land grabbing or land fragmentation. So the productivity still remains very small. Environmental destruction, because if they're investing in agriculture, our agriculture is really rain-fed, it's climate dependent. So if there's some small shock there, there's a problem. Of course, now they're trying to do climate smart agriculture. How do you improve resilience? But these are largely projects. And if they work very well and leave knowledge behind, well and good. But what we've seen in this country is when a project ends, people see it as it was that project, and then they don't. So I wouldn't give it 35%. I would give it slightly higher in terms of the low people. But you need something to make them sustainable. So if we all remain small at that level, then it's counterproductive.
And Professor, staying with you before I get to Honorable Dombo, especially in the area where you are, creating jobs and wealth. Let's look at education specifically.
Yes.
Because when we go to education where they say delivering education is the highest, it has 44%. And what really improves this is health, as Bashasha was presenting this. But when we look at the numbers of primary school, this year, you and I were here discussing education. 740,000 sat PLE.
Yes.
345,000 sat UCE. 97,000 sat USCE. 30,000 went to university. Yet between 5 to 7 million are the ones that started P1.
Yes.
If they are looking at output and not outcome, isn't there a mismatch in what they're really looking at?
Not really. I think, you know, what we need to know is globally, you don't get the same number of people who join P1 finishing at university. On the global average, it's like 13% that go to university out of a general cohort that starts at a certain level. But the question we should ask is, even when they have not gone to university, what else have they done? Where else have they gone? Okay? So are there technical institutes where they have gone? Or because we turned every technical institute into a university, then maybe they haven't gone anywhere. So that's where we need information to track. If they have not gone into university, where else have they gone? Maybe they have gone to skilling programs. But if they have not gone to skilling program, then where have they gone? It means they have dropped out. Then we have a problem, okay? But right now, we don't have that kind of information of where have they gone. We need to do tracer studies. What we know is this is the number which started, this is the number which has concluded. So we need to account for the gap. And I think that is a problem. And one way to deal with that problem, in the PDM, there's this whole Parish Development Information Management System, which unfortunately hasn't started very well. But if data collection was collected on a daily basis or on a routine basis, then you could be able to easily say that although they didn't finish, this is where they went. You would be able to say everyone who got PDM money produced this, and this is how it has transformed livelihoods. Right now, we don't have that systematic way of collecting information. So we just go to a community and we say, okay, this one got PDM, bought this, is doing this, and we say yes. Now, if we are to come back 2-3 years later, you may not know because there's no systematic collection of data. If there's one thing that has to be activated very well in PDM, is it pillar number 6, the one on information management system. But now also to go back to what you're saying, even if they didn't finish university, supposing we have all the information, where else can they be taken? In stronger economies, even those who haven't finished school or who drop out at 16, because that's the average in developed countries, they'll find something to do. Because there's a lot of artisanry, there's a lot of industry, and you see industry requires people of all calibers. Industries don't just take, actually in industries, graduates are very few. The rest, some of them are in the casual laborers, they're mid-level kind of categories. So the issue is if they have dropped out, where have they gone? So of course there are some few industries that have come up with regard to cement, with regard to agro-processing and assembling things. But if you don't have a strong economy, even if they reach university, they will still have a problem with finding jobs. But if you had a strong economy, even if they didn't reach university, they would still be absorbed in the different industrial bases. So we need to work on the industrialization.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dombo, let me come to you. 6 manifestos, 96 tackling the task ahead, 2001 consolidating achievements, prosperity for all, Bonaba Gaggawale, 2006, 2011, prosperity for all, better services and delivery and job creation, taking Uganda through modernization, and finally securing the future. When you look at these 6 manifestos you have had as the NRM, are you progressive? Are you regressing? What is happening?
Thank you very much, and thank you, my colleagues, for the observations. First and foremost, I want to thank the Manifesto implementation team for the honesty in self-evaluation and giving the type of results that they did. Ordinarily, anyone would have expected that since it was a self-evaluation and you wanted to portray yourself in the eyes of the public, that they would have exaggerated the marks or the level of performance. But that level of honesty is so good. But when you look at the statistics, there is a very big percentage which is work in progress, of about 40%. And all manifestos, they give aspirations. All those themes that you have been giving for the 6 manifestos over a period of time, they are aspirations that this is where I want to be given the conditions that you are operating in. Setting a manifesto is based on conditions. That one, you have a people who believe and will move together in what you're doing. Secondly, that you are going to mobilize the necessary resources in order to implement what you have planned to do. And thirdly, and most important, that could be there will be no interventions or interruptions that will distract you from implementing what you're supposed to do. You saw at the advent of this manifesto, there was COVID-19, which was not something planned for, and which led to a whole economy being closed down for a whole 2 years. Children not going to school, shops not opening, people not moving, and the whole industry and sectors of the economy totally closed. I don't know whether the study tried to capture the effect of this on the manifesto implementation. It is something that we may want to look at and find out what has been. But one of the things which I've observed over the period of time is that however aspirations we may have, when we have a population that is still not very literate, whose productive capacity is still so low, limited because of education, and also the type of education that our people are receiving. Doctor, I'm one of the people who admire really transformation of the nation.
Yeah.
But go and sit on your television and watch at any time when our children are graduating and find out what are they graduating in and what are they going to do. How productive are they going to be? At times I wonder why government, because government has relied on the private sector for the expansion of the education sector. But what is it that we must do? That because parents sell land and whatever they have in order to acquire education. But children acquire education which they are not going to put to use. Then after failing, then they go to a presidential skilling hub to be skilled. When they have spent a whole 15 years in education, but their hands cannot produce anything. So the challenges of manifesto implementation and transformation of the economy are based on one, the type of education that we have and the mindset of the people. If you have been in a labor sector and you have employed people and you see the mindset of the people who you are trying to employ, it's a very huge problem. We need as a nation to work tremendously much in order for us to transform. Secondly, Andrew Mwenda talks about the policies of industrialization and capacity building and also deliberate technological transfer. When I was in Parliament in 1996, Honorable Nasasira came up with a policy in the Ministry of Works that a certain percentage of contracts be given to the local contractor, the Zimwes of that time, the Zimwes and other local contractors in order to build their capacity. But what exactly happened? Every contractor who was given the capacity to expand, they progressively shifted money into estate. People would earn money through road construction, but their capacity was not being built. One time when I was a guild president in Makerere, I asked the university. There was a program to innovate Makerere University, which I think was given to a company called SBI, something like that. But they were getting a contractor outside, but we have a technological department, Department of Technology in Makerere University. So I asked the Vice Chancellor, I said, why can't the university students pay it? I traveled out of the country and seen university students doing work to earn money. So why the mindset of the Ugandans believe that a university student studying and you have a tie, it is inferior for you to go and pick a brush and paint a whole of residence and earn that money. So we must begin dealing with the mindset of the people, and you saw it is one of the pillars under PDA that we must deal with mindset. Then we come to address education in order to have people who can acquire the technology, even if you want to transfer, like my brother Mwenda is talking about. But why government has left the private sector in education to do what they want, they are training things that will not help our people here, I don't know. Could be Honorable Manya Mshega's report when it comes out on education review and they propose, if they discover any challenges in education and propose on the way forward, then that's where we can go. So, whereas these aspirations are good and we're trying very much to secure the future of Ugandans, like right now, there are very many limitations and limiting factors because of this. The other issue which has, when you go to the manifesto implementation, has been the ability to fund the transformation and the growth that we aspire to do. When you look at revenue generation and how the revenue is being utilized, you discover that a lot of the money that we collect has gone into debt servicing. We're even going to get a bigger problem because of the challenges that we're likely to acquire because of the sanctions that are going to put on Uganda, because of the regulations that we have put in place. But like the president gave the assurance to the people of Uganda that these are challenges which are big, but once you overcome them, then Uganda will be able to stand on its legs in order to do the transformation as promised to the people of Uganda. So, all those sub-themes, prosperity for all,
Operation Wealth Creation.
Operation Wealth Creation, now securing the future of Ugandans, are going to work, but they will require that there is a mindset for everybody to move together. The other bigger challenge, which I've observed in the implementation of the manifesto of these areas, has been the political will of the people of Uganda to move together. I have watched members of parliament go stand in the population and they tell the people, say, no, zino sente zamwe muzije muzirye. Then you wonder what type of leadership somebody is providing. And if you want the population to the village side, I'll give an example of Butaleja, where I was a member of parliament for 20 years. Butaleja is one of the areas where electricity coverage is very high. Almost every sub-county, the government is now here in the manifesto is talking about every district headquarters. In Butaleja, we have electricity every sub-county headquarters. In many, actually most of the parishes will have electricity. But what surprised me, in Butaleja and other neighboring districts, you'd find on a Sunday people stealing electricity in the church in order to pray and play equipment. And what causes this is because people don't have incomes to pay for the electricity. You get on a Friday, people are in a mosque, but they're also praying and peeping to see whether Umeme is coming in order to enforce. So, however much we talk about transformation, unless we do wealth creation, to put money in the minds and the hands of the people, then the transformation agenda will be delayed and will be affected. So I want people to know that transformation securing the future, as the government of Uganda promised, is good, but it will only work if every sector of the economy and if every individual, if every home plays their role that they must do. I'll give you an example. When somebody's home is good and they have money, they will not complain about going to a hospital and they get there and there are no drugs. Somebody will go to a private clinic and pay because they can afford it to pay. Right now, many people are dying. I was in Msaleji and I give an example that most of the people dying now are not dying because of lack of drugs, but many people are dying because of poverty. Because they can give a transfer, they can recommend people to a referral from the Uganda Health Center to Mbale Hospital. And somebody does not have money for transport. And somebody does not have money to go and shift the patient to the hospital. Now, when they carry the patient home and the patient dies, somebody may think the patient has died because of the disease, but this is because of poverty. So, we must, in order to fulfill the security of our future, that the wealth creation campaign must be enhanced and enabled. But these go together, that education must be enhanced. The people's will, the politicians must agree that we must think and move in the same direction. And finally, that government's capacity to fund and also the level of corruption which undermines service delivery must be something that we must fight in order for all these things to work.
We shall speak about the downside of these, especially the challenges that he spoke about. But let me come to Julius. Julius, it was a self-assessment by Bashasha and the NRM. As an external, what assessment would you give them? 35% was their performance. In your view, what is their performance?
I'm surprised that they were really very honest. I mean, because when you look at also the midterm review of NDP, it was 17%. In the whole of NDP, 17%. So 35%, I think they were brutally honest themselves. And which I think is very good, because for me is, we really, the numbers should speak for themselves. Let us not sugarcoat the numbers. Let the numbers speak for themselves, and then we see what we can do from there, because that gives you an opportunity actually to improve. So actually when you called me about this and you're thinking about the manifesto, in my mind I'm like, okay, how would we even start this? And then I went to my budget numbers and I looked at how much money have they spent. Because when you look at the financial for 2021, 2022, and the one that we are in, if you add them up, you come to around 145 trillion Ugandan shillings. So 155 trillion Ugandan shillings, you begin to say, okay, what would you have achieved having spent all this money? What kind of a vision would the Ugandan be looking at having spent 145 trillion Ugandan shillings? And I think that's why I say they were brutally honest, because in my mind I'm like, okay, where is the gap? Why is it that we are at 35? Why is it that we are not at 70, for example, above that? And I think we need to take it to the level of not on what is happening, but what can we do better? I think the biggest challenge that the government is facing is not because of lack of money, Timothy. Never. And I've had this argument. This country does not lack money. The biggest challenge this country has is implementation challenge. We have so much money that we are failing to implement projects. One is the money is so much that absorbing it becomes a problem. We return back money to the treasury. Returning back money to the treasury wouldn't actually be a very big problem for me, but when you borrow money abroad and you fail to absorb it, to bring it in, the Auditor General is telling us that we have around 14.5 trillion Ugandan shillings of undisbursed loans. And just to bring it down to an ordinary person is that you go to a bank, you borrow 100 million, but you are unable to utilize it for one way or the other. It stays there. But remember that money is attracting interest. So if you don't deal with that, even the 35% my brother is telling us about is going to reduce. Because just imagine if that 14 trillion Ugandan shillings was in this economy of Uganda. The skilling programs you're talking about, Andrew Mone is talking about the industrialization policy, all of these things, if we were really prepared to get this money in, it would take us a very big step. Why are we not utilizing it? Because of the implementation. We are never prepared to immediately start a project. And I think I'm beginning to realize that there is too much politics in implementing some of these programs. Because if you have a very strong, if you can have a very strong system of saying, if a project is to start, these are the steps it should take. You put them there, but somehow some projects go through the wind and then they land. The Auditor General is telling us that 35% of the projects that are actually running don't have feasibility plans. A feasibility plan is, if you want to start a project, you
start with it.
you first plan for it and say, this road is going to pass here. These are likely to be the obstacles. This is how we should get out of these obstacles. It is likely to cost this amount of money. You plan so that by the time you get the money, you know that this is what is going to happen. But for you get the money and then you start doing the feasibility plan. Towards in the middle of it, you find out that actually this road might not pass here because probably the soils are not good. You need to divert and take it somewhere else. Therefore, the money that you are borrowing, you're not going to use all of it because you now to do something else. So that's number one. And I think we need to deal with that head on. Build the capacity within our ministries to ensure that if you want to implement a project, implement it on time, but also on budget. The second challenge I think the government needs to deal with is setting priorities right. I don't think the appointment of 300 RDCs at this particular point was a serious priority for government. Considering the fact that the challenges we are facing, our doctors want more salaries. Our teachers want more salaries. If you look at the salaries of our civil servants, it's so sad. Find the whole commission around 2 million, something like that. So, if we could set our priorities right and say, since agriculture is the backbone of this economy, what do we need to do to ensure that actually we invest in value addition for it? You can't be, and I think Mwenda brought it very well to say that you can't take 100 years and you continue exporting cotton bales. surely there is something we need to learn and say, let's add value to it. Even to say that we can't even export our maize to Sudan. Sudan says, no, your maize is of poor quality. So if really Sudan says that our maize is of poor quality, do you think we can ever say this to Europe? You definitely will not. You cannot. So if we cannot be able to say, this is a sector that is going to drive this economy, let us invest in it, add value in it. But if we can't say we're going to do everything at the same time, I can tell you the 35% we're talking about even is going to diminish. My last point on this one really is that because of too much resources that we have in this country, we are even failing to provide the standards that we want. What kind of school should the government of Uganda have? A school, what should you have as a government? Because when you look at the former schools, the Makoboles, if you come to Masaka High, to Mbarara High, you seem to see that schools of the same structure, the same design, and you would say this is a secondary school. But now you can't tell which is secondary school, which is a primary school. It's very difficult, simply because the standards have gone away. And to add an insult to an injury, again, which I think really the government needs to fix, is that we even don't know how much it costs for us to build a government facility, for example. It is the price you will put out. If you say me, I'm going to build this health center at 5 billion, that's it. This same health center at 5 billion, another same health center is going to be built at 10 billion, the same size and design, so the price vary. And I was giving an example that every single pen from the same supplier, the same manufacturer, is going to supply different departments of government at different prices. You are losing money. We have been told that in this country that a road is around a kilometer around 4.1 billion, but in our neighboring countries, it is far, far less than that. So when you don't instill discipline in our public finance management, I can tell my brother here that getting out of 35% is going to be extremely very difficult. Not because you don't have money, not because you don't have bright people, but simply because we have failed to instill discipline in the way we want to deliver to the people. And I want to inform my brother. He said that the manifesto is an aspiration. I think for me as a Ugandan, it's not aspiration. It's the promise you made to me. And that's why I voted you in power. That you promised to build those schools, those roads. But when you come and say, no, I thought it was a dream that probably shall have to do it. I think that you have cheated me, because by the time I voted, you pretty clear said, this is the promise I make for you, and this is what I'm going to deliver for you. So for me is that it is an opportunity now for the Manifesto unit, Timothy, to say, yes, here, this is where we are, 2.5 years. They are remaining within 2.5 years. What do we need to do? And I think we don't need rocket science. The things we can do are within our means.
Washasha, let me come to you. Last year, the same season, because come mid this month, you'll be calling on ministries to present where their position is. Last year, the same season, you were about 21%, and about 77% in commencement. There's a jump from 22 to 35%. But when we look at this, and we look at next year being an electoral year, do you hope to get anywhere further than 35%? And how will you get there?
Yeah, because I would say that the manifesto is a living document. Every other planning, budgeting that comes the way is intended to address all these commitments that are in place. So we are always saying that as far as this journey is concerned, this is where we are. But that is not to say we have stopped. So there is still this hope of saying, given all these observations that have been made here, maybe reprioritization of what we need to do, and issues like budget discipline and mindset change of our people, and those both in implementation and the ones who are benefiting from these programs or who are on the participation of the implementation chain, that there is all the opportunity that this 35% can change. Already 46% is work in progress. So assumedly, we were able to deliver even this work in progress. So that should, and added to already what we have already achieved so far, that would give us a much higher percentage. And that would be, maybe would be around 80%. And to me, that would not be a bad score for this.
And just a follow-up question before I get to Andrew. When I look at what Julius has spoken about the budget, the next financial year is proposed to be about 58-point-something trillion there. When you look at the budget and look at the priorities, it's debt, it is infrastructure, it's security. When you come to your manifesto, I see 5 thematic areas. When I look at the NRM manifesto, it has 4 areas. A lot of policies, a lot of documents, NDP3, at what point do they interact?
No, there is some degree of alignment. There's some degree of alignment. And like you rightly said, you see, some of these, some investments in given areas also lead to the performance or better performance of others. If you are, let's address like infrastructure projects. If we have invested very well in the roads, we have put electricity in place, that will promote maybe the level of industrialization we are talking about, or levels of investment that will attract levels of investment in the countryside, both foreign and domestically. People can move their products to the markets. So, in a way, that will now lead to a better performance in some other sectors of the economy, because these are core. And like you rightly said, if the country is secure, you assume a situation where all this is there, but the country is not secure. What would that mean for the country? So, the debt servicing, yes, it's a challenge that will be consuming most of the budget, but the rest, if like Julius was observing, if the rest is put and focused to the areas that we think can make can improve the economy. We have areas like tourism where the low-hanging fruits, if money is put there, and we have areas like fishing sector, the infrastructure needs to be constantly invested in, electricity, moving all the whole country wired. These are what you would call the triggers that would help even other sectors. If you are talking about wealth creation, meaning people, whatever they can produce can be put on the roads and reach the markets and can be sold, then it works.
Andrew, let me come to you. One of the things, the fifth there is economic and political integration. Let's put aside the politics. You gave a very good example, especially on cotton. 190 bales being sent out, $50 million, 10,000 here, $50 million, the same there. Where should we put our money as a country, especially to achieve this socio-economic transformation, to achieve these thematic areas? Where should we as a country, two areas that we should put our money and say, you know what, the future is secure?
You see, I'm not so sure where we can put the money, so I'm going to speculate. One, Julius hinted on this. You see, a jack of all trade is a master of none.
True.
If you're going to design industrial policy, you must identify priority areas and say, these are the areas of industrialization that we want to promote. Right now, Uganda's plan is to promote every single thing. So if you're a Chinese investor coming to, we have so many of these, what do you call them? We have so many industrial parks, everybody comes to do whatever they want. So you're providing infrastructure, providing tax exemptions, you're providing different subsidies on water, on electricity to everybody. I think that omnibus policy is wrong. Uganda needs to say, what are the sectors that can give us a competitive advantage, or we can actively construct a competitive advantage in a particular area. I'll give you an example. In the previous economics, the old economics, there was this belief that if you're looking for a competitive or comparative advantage, the theory of comparative advantage said if you have good soils, you are stupid not to plant cotton and coffee and sell them. If your skill is high, if your advantage is your comparative advantage in highly skilled people, then you should do manufacture designer suits. So in other words, it is your factor endowments that will determine what you produce. What countries like South Korea and Japan have shown, Japan does not produce steel. It is the biggest producer of, you know, the biggest Hyundai. Their biggest business is what? Is manufacture of ships. Not even cars, ships. The Koreans are the second largest refiners of oil. They do not even have one barrel of oil in their ground. So you can actively construct comparative advantage or competitive advantage in a particular sector if you choose so. So you come to Uganda, I would say, what in the National Planning Authority needs to sit and say, what are the areas we think can give this country, maybe based on fact endowments, based on what we project to the future, give us an advantage in international markets. So you can say we're going to do electronics, textiles, and maybe 3 or 4. Focus all your energy on those things. Right now we're focusing on everything, therefore you're massive none. That is one. The second thing is, I think at the level of President Museveni himself, because a big influence on policy, he has a very naive, I should say, understanding of foreign direct investment. You see, when you bring a foreign investor, this belief that foreign investment, first of all, let me make a point clear. I believe that foreign direct investment is a necessary, absolutely necessary component of any project of transformation, because it brings capital, it brings technology, it brings skills, it brings access to international markets. Fine. But when you invite a foreign investor, note the following. The foreign investor will produce goods and use roads built at taxpayers' expense. That is one. 2, he will use a labor force trained in government, in public schools at taxpayer expense. That same labor force goes to government hospitals and gets treated. He will use electricity subsidized by the state. He will use water subsidized by the state, by the taxpayer, I must say. He will enjoy a security environment financed by the state, a judicial system financed by the state. So the free things a foreign investor gets are really a large basket of what the government provides. If you give this foreign investor permission to repatriate 100% of their profits, you give them tax exemptions on corporation tax, on this and this and that, you may find that the net benefit from that foreign investment, first of all, you have given them tax exemptions, you have allowed them to repatriate profits, you have put there no requirements for technology transfer, for skills transfer, for building local capacity, for development of other domestic enterprises. You may find that the net benefit from this foreign investor is negative. If we look at what he has brought in and what he has taken out, you will find that maybe he has taken out more than what he has brought in. So the worship of foreign direct investment in Uganda needs to end. Every foreign investment project must be assessed on the basis of what really the country provides them and what they provide in return. I can tell you most of the foreign investments in Uganda, these big banks you see, these telecom companies you see, whatever it is, I think their return to Uganda is negative. So, supporting the development of domestic industry is extremely important, because those are the guys who will transform our products into finished, our raw products into finished products, and then say, look at whatever Chinese are doing. Have you been to our industrial parks? The Chinese bring finished cloth from China, and we just stitch it here and say made in Uganda. We need them to go and buy our own cotton from the garden, transform it into cloth, and then finally sell it here and abroad. And I have seen that Uganda government has tried to protect local industry, textile industry here, in order to promote it, but they have used the wrong instrument. They have used the instrument of the tariff. They have imposed a tariff per kilogram. Let me tell you why that is wrong. You see, when we set up Goodwill tiles in Kapeka, we put a high tariff on imported tiles. Kapeka right now is working very well. Now they are producing about 40,000 meters of tiles per day. Why has it succeeded? How much is a meter, a square meter of tiles?
Around 38 now, I think.
So we are saying, say maybe 30,000, 35,000 at the factory. How much does it weigh?
Oh, around 3 kilos, 4 kilos.
It could be 5-6 kilos, okay? So if you're going to smuggle it into Uganda, it's very expensive, because 10 kilograms is about 350,000 A border may not even carry more than, it cannot carry 50 or 100 kilograms of it. But cloth, if I import high quality fabric, I can get cloth worth 40 million and put on a motorbike and smuggle it through from Tanzania or Kenya into Uganda. So tariffs don't work on products that have high value and low weight. If I bring high quality fabrics, I can smuggle it. Makes sense for me. If you put a high tariff, I can smuggle it. That's what is happening to Uganda right now. There's huge smuggling of cotton. So what do you do? Normally, countries that have industrialized through textiles have not used tariffs, they have used subsidies. There are different ways government can create a market, domestic initially, for local textile farms. And how do you do this? Look at textile farms. They are so small. Their scale is so low, so their unit costs are high. I can bring a meter of cloth, on average, from China, arrives in Uganda, CIF Kampala, at 7,000 shillings. The same in Uganda is produced at, no, it's 8,000 shillings. In Uganda it's produced at 11,000. So 3,000 more. How do you reduce the cost of producing one meter of cloth, from 11,000 to 7,000 so that you can outcompete Chinese goods? So just a moment, if you can provide a market to local manufacturers so they can increase scale to enjoy economies of scale, which reduces unit costs over time through a subsidy, then you can reduce the unit costs and they become competitive. Then you can begin penetrating regional and international markets because you become competitive. We have not done that, and what we have done is the wrong strategy, is of tariffs. What it has done is increased so much smuggling that URA right now is complaining that they no longer collect much taxes from textiles because most textiles in Uganda are smuggled.
And I'm glad you have spoken of the areas we need to focus on. But one question before we take a break. The village banking model in South Korea, and also all these cash-based models that we have in Uganda. When I look at the Youth Livelihood Fund that was 2016-2021, 265 billion was set aside. Only 162 billion was disbursed. When you look at PDM, which seems like a silver bullet to the young people, to creating jobs, to creating capital, why did the village banking model succeed where PDM seems to be struggling, where Youth Livelihood Fund program has seemed to struggle? And what do we need to do to bring those young people up?
The disadvantage I have, Timothy, is I'm a student of Korea's industrialization, not these village banks. So if you talk about industrialization in South Korea, I can speak volumes here. But let me come to my criticism of PDM. I think that PDM is a good idea that is implemented wrongly. First, it is wrong to assume that every peasant in the village is a Schumpeterian entrepreneur. I don't know whether you know Joseph Schumpeter. Is a Schumpeterian entrepreneur. It's not. And it's wrong for you to say that supply of money will create jobs. Supply of capital will stimulate entrepreneurship. No. You see, entrepreneurship should stimulate supply of capital. So I would support the parish development model as something like venture capital. If you go to the Silicon Valley, they will tell you the average success rate of venture capital is 1 in 13. A venture capitalist will invest in 13 projects and maybe 1 or 2 will succeed. They tell you a 20% success rate in venture capital is considered AAA performance. It's rare. So a guy has an idea called Google or Facebook or Microsoft or Apple. They go to a venture capitalist, he gives them money, and it comes into a big company. But for us, what we do not know is there are other 15 projects the guy funded and they need to work. But the one that works creates a global company. Yeah. So if government is throwing money out there, it's a good idea. Throw money out there so that you can fish out the next Google. How you do it is not to say every parish should receive money. No. Money should be available for people with innovative ideas. In which case, if a young person in a village comes out with an idea, we should fund it. You cannot simply say, here is money, you go create ideas. What you're creating is a political slush fund where people will pick money, go eat it and walk away. And the likelihood that you'll get the right entrepreneurs enjoying that money will become very low. So I think that we should have ideas come first and then money is supplied. There should be demand for this money, not the supply of it. We are supplying money to cause demand. I think that's wrong. So PDM, they should rethink it in a way that it should finance ideas that have emerged, not to go to every parish and say, you generate an idea and we fund it. That's the wrong way to do it. The second thing that Uganda needs to think about, you're talking about banking. I don't know of any country that has developed at two levels. One, that your entire credit system is controlled by foreigners. I have never seen that country. If you guys you find that country, you come and tell me. So, the local Korean bank, whatever may criticize about Sudir, grew up here, understood how Ugandans think and work. This guy is just a senior 4 graduate. He built a bank that became the 4th largest bank within 20 years, competing against these big boys. How? Because he understood how the system works. But you have banks from abroad, highly risk averse, and what are they doing? They are very suspicious of Ugandans, so they will not lend Ugandans money. And as a result, you have a large community of money lenders lending at the 240% per month, and they're the ones who are thriving. And our banks buy government paper, sit on it, and they don't lend me and you.
True.
So Uganda needs to think of two things. One, that if you want proper commercial banking, how can you have local participation in commercial banking? The second is that transformative investments cannot be have a long gestation period between when you begin a project and when it becomes profitable. So you need long-term money. That long-term money cannot be provided by commercial banks. Why? A commercial bank takes short-term deposits. They take your money. Tomorrow you may appear on your app. You want to transfer money to your phone and spend it. You are going to, with an ATM, to withdraw it. If they lend money you have put it on a short-term to a long-term project, they will suffer what we call a liquidity mismatch. They will run out of money. So normally, transformative investments are financed by development banks. If you look at Japan, they use the postal saving system to mobilize long-term funds to finance long-term investments. If you look at Singapore, you look at Britain, whichever country has developed, they had long-term money to finance long-term investments. So Uganda needs to think of how do we mobilize money using NSSF, using Post Bank, perhaps using different instruments of long-term savings, even using the budget to put their long-term money to finance these what I would call transformative investments that have a long gestation period. The final thing, of course, I have seen, the government of Uganda is obsessed with reducing the electricity tariff. If you study different industries, actually you will find that the cost of electricity is not the biggest threat to, except for steel, cement industries, which consume a lot of electricity, is not the biggest threat to many enterprises in Uganda. You have the finance system where companies have to borrow at 17, 20%.
Cost of money.
Yes, the cost of money is so high. And one of the reasons why the cost of money is so high is right now we have 8 trillion shillings held up in court. Timothy borrowed, failed to pay, rushed to court. The matter is being adjudicated, the bank cannot collect money on it. If you cannot have commercial courts that can resolve these disputes within 2 weeks, within 1 month, this economy will continue to stagnate. So the first thing is the rule of law, that if I have borrowed and I have gone to court, the matter must be disposed within within a month. Because it's 5 years or 4 years. Increase interest rate in order to cover for your default. So interest rates are high, among other reasons, and I think it's very important, is because banks are charging the good customers, they're penalizing them in order to pay for the failures of the bad customers. So Uganda needs, but there are small administrative things that Uganda can undertake. This country has a parliament of 529 members. 529. And we pay them 40 million. Why not cut them to half and appoint judges everywhere? You see, because the judges will give us a much more dynamic economy, which will afford us to pay a parliament of 600 tomorrow. But we have put the cart before the horse, and the horse is failing to push the cart. Tomorrow, this country needs to treble, maybe quadruple the size of the judiciary and put standards and say disputes must be resolved quickly. I tell you, if property rights were protected and commercial disputes resolved quickly, you would add maybe 1-2% rate of growth on GDP.
Okay.
And they appointed 300 RDCs. Why do
Assistant RDC.
yes, why don't they appoint 200 judges
Okay.
and magistrates?
Let me read some feedback. Hello, Timothy. This is Bwango from Fort Portal City. NRM midterm review is very promising, especially on PDM in place. The Presidential Industrial Hub, Skilling Initiative, Kira Bus Factory, the Uganda Airlines, and the new routes will generate more revenue in short term. which is a performance scoreboard, will put it at 60%. In fact, including the level of export of coffee, dairy, and the economy will stabilize. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Timothy, the guests in the studio. NRM Manifesto Securing the Future has done little for me. It secures the future for specifics, and very few people in Uganda. Concerning education, how does the NRM rate itself? When the citizens struggle for themselves for higher education, maybe they are rating themselves whom the government has sponsored. But for now, no one is with them there. They're struggling. We're all struggling. This is Philemon from Arua. Honestly, I love the show, and I love the brains that are there, but at least 3% needs to be produced everywhere. Big up, okay? Finally, this is Waiso from Ginger. Really nothing has been done since because the NRM has failed to secure the futures of Ugandans. Elders have been moving for 38 years looking for their pensions. You really convinced me that the young generation can survive and have its future secured? Interesting there. Let's take a quick break, and when we'll be back, we'll be discussing this and more.
Fred!
Osmosis.
Freddy! Fred Dollar, my boss, CEO Inojo, the general of generals, the conqueror of conquerors, the first and the final, the sky above the skies, the promised land, the terms and the conditions, the international king crocodile, the source of the
Osmosis.
the Nile.
I don't have money today.
Just take a polite loan of 200k to stock my shop. The signs and symptoms of success. The bank commander, not the bank teller.
Why hustle for a loan when you've got MTN Momo? We're sorting it. Use the Momo app or dial *165*5# for all quick loans. Choose from the different loan options from our partners and get one that works for you. Together, we're unstoppable.
Welcome to the IFRIS Fact Checker, proudly brought to you by the Uganda Revenue Authority. Is the IFRIS a tax? IFRIS is not a tax. It stands for the Electronic Fiscal Receipting and Invoicing Solution, which is a platform designed to monitor the value-added tax VAT reported to the Uganda Revenue Authority by traders. By using IFRIS, you can eliminate the tedious process of managing records and enjoying the benefits of an efficient and streamlined system. Is IFRIS compulsory in Uganda? Only VAT-registered taxpayers who must issue e-invoices are required to use IFRIS for all transactions, whether exempt or taxable. Does the Uganda Revenue Authority expect me to use IFRIS when I'm not VAT-registered? You can enroll for IFRIS voluntarily even if you are not VAT registered. This allows you to enjoy the benefits it offers to businesses. Have taxpayers been supported to use IFRIS? The Uganda Revenue Authority has a taxpayer education and support program that is comprehensive in its scope. The program aims to promote awareness among taxpayers about various strategic initiatives that the URA has implemented. How is the Commission agent, also known as the Omoyiribi, affected and assisted under IFRIS? If a common agent or Omoyiribi is registered for taxes, they are required to keep stock of the goods they sell and issue an electronic invoice. However, if a commission agent is not registered for VAT, they can sell the items as usual and provide a regular receipt. It is important to ensure that the receipt includes all necessary information, such as the business name, date, contact information, tax identification number, description of items, and the amount sold, among other details. What happens when the network or internet is down while using IFRIS? You can issue e-invoices using IFRIS app or desktop software, even in offline mode. However, you must connect to the internet within a week to upload the generated information to the system. What platforms are in place to enable you use IFRIS. The Uganda Revenue Authority has provided alternative channels and technology options that traders may choose from to use IFRIS. These include the IFRIS app on mobile smartphones, the desktop application, the URA web portal, the electronic fiscal device, and the system-to-system connection.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangoso. I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sali, Andrew Mwenda, Willis Bashasha, Julius Mukunda, and Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. We're discussing the media review of the NRM Manifesto there, and we're trying to understand in 2.5 years, at 35% and 46% commencing, will they be able to achieve their desired goal of a secured future for you and I? That's the biggest question. Professor, when you look at this manifesto and you look at next year and looking at how different political actors are already charged, is it possible to go past this, and where would they be able to aim in their performance?
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think before I answer that, I needed to clarify two things Honorable Dombo said. And that is about the kind of education we are churning out and whether university students can't do some work around the university. I must say our students actually do work around the university. If you come to the College of Business, the painting that has been done on the College of Business was by university students. Some of the roads, the patchwork has been done by university students. Of course, the university has to navigate a tightrope because Makerere. They have to navigate a tightrope where you have to put students at high levels and they don't have insurance. So there are some legalities to work on, but some of them do internship within the university. So that has occurred until recently when KCC did the roads with the compensation of the whatever, the roads were being maintained by students from technology. So that happens, not that they're just high up there and they have a wrong attitude, they actually work. And then there is a comment you made around jobs and the kind of degrees actually that are being churned out. You know, for a long time that has been held, but a lot of it is also a fallacy. This whole belief that actually people are not getting jobs because the kind of education they got is problematic or the kind of degrees they did are problematic. The issue is even those that seem to come from the areas of need, there are no jobs. Okay? So we need to address, because the issue is not just on the production side, it's also on the absorption side. That's why the factors Andrew is talking about of building a strong economy are very important. Otherwise, even your private scientists are leaving the country because they finish, there are no jobs for them, they're not going to just be on the street, or they're not going to become administrators because of the kind of things which are there. Project administrators, project coordinators, they leave. They go for masters, they don't return. They go for where their labor can get the best paid. So building a strong economy with industrialization is very important. So let us just stop thinking people are not being productive because of what they studied. But even with that, I appreciate that there's a need for skilling. And that's why maybe we need to go back to the education people had in the past, where there was more skills, less of rote. And really that again goes back to what you ably observed of the education sector was left too much to the private sector. But many things were left to the private sector. Actually, what you saw was a real retreat of the state, except in the area of peace and security. And so that became, to some, it is an abdication of state responsibility. But anyway, that's the economic model we chose for a certain time, leaving everything to the market. And it has proliferated so much down that you see, there must be some level of direction. There must be someone in charge of how things are working. It can't be whoever wants, let them do what they want, okay? And so you'll have all the small and micro enterprises doing this. You have all the PDM parishes doing that. How about if we chose particular parishes that have a comparative advantage in producing something, those of us who are operating at lower level? And then you put basic infrastructure for everyone to benefit in. Like it could be a small industry there. It could be something like if people, for example, are in the east and they are where all these stones are coming from, let there be a factory in that area so that it creates value And what is coming from Elgon to Kampala is something that has been value added, and is cement, not just stones to break our roads and do all that kind of thing. So there's a lot we can do. We can now not just sit and hope that people are going to change their minds and become very good and then do think as we think. That actually means even those of us who are doing national transformation are not sure what we want to do. The first question we should ask ourselves ideologically, where do we want this country to go? What kind of Ugandan do we want to produce? So when you know the kind of Ugandan you want to produce, then you align the education sector, which is the biggest vehicle for cultural transformation actually. Then you also align the industrial, then you align, so you align many things, but you have to first know the target that you want to go at. But it can't just be free fall for anyone. Those who will come out, and those who will fall by the wayside will fall by the wayside. So ideological transformation is very important. Ideological direction is very important for national transformation. It cannot just be liberalization, because when we privatize, then everything becomes a donor-driven thing. Okay, so if the donors say now we are focusing on climate change, we all go climate change. If the donors say now the issue is GBV and all funding is around that, we all go. So you find the universities in that, you find the government programs, everyone is in that. And then within the government programs, you find the sectors competing. Then you have a lot of fragmentation. And then that becomes a challenge to productivity, and especially for people like Dr. Bashasha, who have to implement a national program, because there's too much fragmentation and competition among the implementers. But anyway, that said, you're saying, where do you see us with the next year being an election year, do you see us able to surpass the 35%? Yeah, I think we will, because even if it's an election year, there will be a government in place. Okay? We hope that with the midterm review, people are going to learn something and see what to improve. But otherwise, if we continue leaving everything to what looks like a market, actually it's not a market, but to non-state intervention is what we are doing, in the absence of local capitalists, because micro-scale producers are really micro. They work for themselves. That is as far as they go. The role of micro-enterprise is to secure livelihoods, okay? It's not really to do national transformation and industrialization. That needs a government agenda. The reason, for example, why you have industrial hubs and research chairs in universities is because you have an industry where they do not understand a certain production line, or they want to improve efficiency in the production. Then they go to the university and say, can we set up this research chair in chemistry to study how you efficiently produce this? Can we set this up in physics? Can we set that up in technology? So education and industry speak to each other. The reason you have a successful Kira EV is because the government picked that up and grew it. Otherwise, when you go to universities, and I'm not just saying Makerere, when you go to universities, when you go to National Council of, not National Council, Uganda National Council of Science and Technology, you find so many things that have been developed by either research teams from different universities in collaboration with internationals, or by clever students, or by people who have not even been to university, but they have developed wonderful ideas. Why are they rotting behind with a lot of weed growing around them? It's largely because there's no government uptake of what they have done. So today we have a successful car industry because government picked it up. But if you have a small economy, how many things can government pick up? Okay? So if government had not picked up Chira EV, it would be still something we talk about in Makerere and we put in a museum there and you all see the green car. But you see, it was taken up, Uganda Development Corporation, it has direct funding from the state. So how about if we had so many other local capitalists who can pick up ideas, send back feelers to the university? That way the university improves what it teaches and the industry improves what it's doing. Okay, right now the universities are trying to explore innovation hubs or innovation pods funded again by UNDP. Hopefully that will be, it's now an Africa-wide issue. And from there they expect to do industrial hubs. But again, someone has to finance it. UNDP is not going to finance the economy of African countries because the universities have to innovate. Governments have to pick up those ventures and grow them. But in between now and next year, of course, if we've taken 2.5 years to be 35%, in 1 year, maybe we might be 40, 40% or 45%. We have to be modest. But so there's not much time, okay? But we hope and we continue hoping. But for that to change, something strategic has to change at our kind of ideological direction, what we want to believe in, and the things members have talked about, the high cost of doing business. I mean, that's the whole reason our micro things remain micro, and you cannot break through to become a big capitalist. Maybe it's the reason why people are given money to do construction and they run and buy real estate. So we need to think about some fundamentals. But for now, I think that's what I can say. Next year, we may not achieve much. We could add on 5%. But I still believe we have a government in place. We continue working. Thank you.
Andrew said something about being a jack of many trades, but a master of none. We seem to be everywhere, as he ably said it. Kira Ivi, very good idea. Is specialization something we need to be thinking about? When we think about this whole chain of Kira Ivi, where should we be? When we think about higher education and the innovation hubs, where should government be plugging in? Not coming and say, like Andrew said, there is supply of money, now create demand of what we need to supply it to.
Yeah, of course, Andrew was very spot on. We cannot create ideas by throwing money at people. You have to have a good idea, and a good idea will attract money. Money does not create the ideas. And that's why I said, for me, I'm not really with the idea of give people money or give household money, even as PDM. The basic thing should have been, in my opinion, to construct the basic infrastructure according to what the different regions have a comparative advantage in. So that now the local farmers, or local groups produce, but then they have an infrastructure, whether it's a factory or whatever it is in the community, to enable them to add value, okay? But now, with 1 million shillings to a peasant household, what do you expect them to do? And they also tell you that there are very high costs of attaining that 1 million shillings. At the end of the day, they say, officially on paper, it was 1 million shillings. In reality, what I got was 450,000. So when I'm to pay back, do I pay back 1 million or do I pay back 450,000? So, of course, what we've been seeing, at least like in the East, RDCs have been going around, and the people from local government to verify. And where they have been found that LOC5s or whoever is managing this process committed crimes, they're telling them to pay back. But you see, that's another adding expense to implementing something. So I've thought, so if a place is a cotton producing area, how about if they got a ginnery instead of 1 million shillings per person? If a parish has, I don't know how many people in a parish, but anyway, if there were like 1,000 families, and instead of giving them that 1 million, how about putting something more sensible in that? But again, it will go back to collecting a lot of information on what we are doing. Right now, we are doing try and error. We need to have our interventions driven with robust research, with robust statistics. And that's why, for me, Pillar 6 of PDM is a very important pillar. We need the information management system, so that we know what are these people doing, what was their performance, their productivity the last year. So how do we help them to go to the next year? But if we just throw out money and we hope some will buy chicken, some will buy pigs, some will buy that, then it becomes a problem. So we are not even just a jack of so many things. It is like, it is not even guided. People just look next door, so and says working very well, let me also do that. So there's not special, it's not even that people have multiple specialization for it so that they're jacks of all trades. It's everyone doing what they think works with the limited information, with the limited guidance, no extension, and that becomes a problem. Now you come back to Chira Ivi, what should we have focused on? First of all, when we look at Chira Ivi, we just look at cars, but at the finished product. But there's a lot of value created in the process. Of course, we know some bits are imported, but there are many bits that are made locally here. The chairs are made locally here. The leather is going to improve. The sewing with the, is it called upholstery for the cars? So there's a lot of offshoot companies that are going to come up with Chira EV. So if that's where we've decided to go first, let us strengthen that. But also we look like we have a very oil. Now that's another area which we've been told is a low-hanging fruit. Of course, we only look at the pump price, but we know that from crude, a lot of things are going to come off. And it's good that we are building a refinery in Is it Masindi or Hoima, wherever it is, anyway, in Bunyoro. So hopefully a lot of that can be harnessed. But if we ship out all the crude, we shall lose the other offsite companies, offshoot companies, from which we would have benefited. Then, in addition to that, then you go to agriculture. So it's another thing we need to pay attention to and invest in, because our comparative advantage, we produce a lot of things, but again, because there's no extension and everyone's producing everything regardless of the quality of soil, no one asks whether that soil is the right soil for that kind of crop, there's no zoning, so it also becomes another problem. So for me, the three areas, we continue strengthening the CAP because we've already invested in the oil sector, agro-industrialization.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dombo, with such an informal economy, with words like kuiriba, juwakalis, what was the notion behind securing a future?
You know, securing the future is not a single destination. And it did not begin with this manifesto. It was a demonstration of a journey which was based on basic factors. For instance, they were looking at first the vast experience of the person who was going to do it, commitment over a number of years, and when you keep seeing the president coming to educate people about what they used to do in their youth movement when he was in school, that is where the transformation started. It didn't begin with this manifesto. But the most important thing in all that is that there must be agreement in the strategic direction on what people want to achieve. You have heard what people have said here. When I was a member of parliament, we hosted a meeting of the IPU, Interparliamentary Union. And they gave us a condition to provide buses, air-conditioned buses, for the delegates. And in the whole of Uganda, there wasn't any single bus.
That was air conditioned.
And above.
That was air conditioned.
That was air conditioned. That is the size of the private sector you're talking about. We had at that time to get permission from His Excellency the President in order to hire buses from Kenya, some of them from the government of Kenya, by the way, and the others from Tanzania, from the private sector. From that day, I observed that perhaps there is a lot that government must do in order to build the capacity of the private sector, if we must rely on it to do what we want to achieve. Just yesterday in Parliament, there was a loan request to fund a pharmaceutical company of a private person in Uganda. Now the debate is if Uganda and the government must secure or provide for what my grandfather was talking about, the Munyoro. Do all people agree that that is the strategic direction we must move in? And two, to the beneficiaries of the resources whose capacity is going to be built. Because yesterday, it was over 500 billion that was approved by Parliament in order to give Mr. Mangola his company capacity to be able to manufacture pharmaceuticals. The question is, what it fails? Is Mangola honest? Was the study done that actually when these funds are provided, it will actually going to realize what has been provided? So in all this that we do as a country, I believe that government needs to build the capacity of the individual players. We saw it in the Ministry of Energy. When they were building, I think, Bujagali Dam, government decided to attract private sector in the power generation. For a whole 5 years or so, there was hardly any private investor coming up to take up power generation until government came up to guarantee. And this forced government provide resources which later stimulated or started the construction of Jagali Dam in order to manufacture electricity. But the question is, does the government have capacity? What's the capacity of government to build the capacity of the private investors in order to be able to make such interventions to help in production? The Kuiriba, people can go into Kuiriba, people can come up with the various innovations, but still the strategic sectors of the economy that require productivity and production in order to enhance this, they will need to be supported by government. But do our politicians agree on the direction that this is the direction we must go?
They have to.
Because that is very important, that people, you have been reading about Singapore. Those people first agreed that this is the direction we must move. We must do technological transfer, let us provide education. They shipped children to America, American universities, they went studied technology and they had the capacity. Once that happened, then they believe that they must set up industrial hubs and people given the capacity to do production. Are we as a country provided to do that? And when it is done, shall we all move together as a nation? 3, those who are trusted with the capacity to do that, are they going to be honest? Or they are going to begin protecting or doing preferential things because their individuals or their children or their next of kin are being favored and preferred in order to occupy certain positions? These are challenges that we see as an economy and as a country, but as a manifesto, as we go ahead, the question you asked my sister. First of all, my brother said that the manifesto is not an aspiration. True, the manifesto is an agreement between us for elections. But the promise for prosperity for all, that is an aspiration. That we aspire that everybody becomes prosperous.
Yeah.
When we are securing the future, that's an aspiration which we work as we implement on the manifesto. So the 3 sectors, to me, I think that as we transform going forward for elections, because next year we're going for elections, we have already started drafting on the next manifesto.
Wow.
We have already started drafting the next manifesto, explaining areas that we may not be able to deliver and why we may not be. Because you must explain to the population why you promised a road and you couldn't deliver the road, or why you promised certain things that didn't occur. That is very important because we get it from the observations in the implementation process, but also in the next round of the National Development Plan. What is it that we promised in the previous National Development Plan 3, which didn't work, and what are the pillars on which the next phase of development is going to be? 1, education is still going to be so fundamental. There is no way a country is going to develop without effective education of the population. We need a certain minimum quantum of educated people to appreciate the technology, to appreciate the financial abilities, but also to develop the entrepreneurial capacity. Somebody will not just wake up from Butaleja and become an entrepreneur when he has not been exposed to the world opportunities that grow. The second one, which is to be fundamental, is to be the expansion of the market. Uganda is a very big country, but with a very limited capacity to consume even what we are producing. Reading about Kenya a few years ago, Kenya started something. I was looking at our dairy production. We're now producing about 3 billion liters of milk, but we only consume about 800 million liters. But how many people in Butaleja have access to the milk?
Few.
Even if we transform the market of Uganda alone to be able to serve milk like the Kenyans did many years ago, when there was a milk program for the schools, the progress and the consumption of milk now in Kenya was deliberately built and developed when that program was introduced in the schools. When the government pulled out, already the capacity of schools to pay for themselves had been built. The people liking and the consumption of milk had been built. And right now, I was reading at the deficiency in their market. They have a demand of about 2.something million liters, which would have been filled by Uganda, but I don't know why this full-time, there have been attempts to close the market against Ugandans. So, if Uganda does not expand, is it possible to create and expand our internal market? For instance, if all schools in Uganda started consuming milk, do we have capacity to supply? But the question will be, who will pay? That's an area that somebody must answer if we can do that. The second one is the regional market, which the president has progressively argued for and nurtured. If we do this and build the capacity of the private sector by us selling our things, the income is generated from the population, and then this will be helping the economy, then we can, in the next 1 or 2 years, be able to sustain by the people paying for what the things that they can consume. The people will be helping government on the cost of living, but finally, we shall be able to deliver on the promises that we have, provided when the people earn income, they also pay the tax. Because you saw to us just 2 weeks ago, you have seen Minister of Finance has released the figures that they are going to give ministries money. But I'm very aware that many ministers have not yet money from the Minister of Finance. Why? Because of our poor revenue collection that has been affected, partially because of the strike that I've had, but also perhaps because of the decampaigning of the tax process which has been taking place.
Honorable Dombo, a question to you, just a follow-up question. Corruption is one of the things Bashasha raised, especially as a challenge. At what point do we stop talking and walk the talk to fight corruption? 10 trillion lost annually, 10 billion was what was recovered. Is this feasible for any country that is thinking about securing its future?
Do you know why it is difficult to fight corruption? Anything that is sweet for the person fighting. You know, corruption is like not prostitution, but
But why don't we be like China and make it very expensive to be corrupt?
I think there have been attempts, but the first thing is that people must agree that corruption is bad.
Which people agree?
But
that's a good question. Which people should
agree, and at what level? How many must agree?
You know, corruption is very attractive. Let us talk to the players who should be fighting corruption. Right now, when you go to many police stations, you can find that at the time of recording the statement, it will be the judicial, not the judicial officer, but perhaps a police officer advising you on how to record the statement in order to fail on the culpability. Secondly, in order to convict somebody, there must be evidence. But when you look at the ability of our judicial officers, but also the prosecuting team, you find that there are a lot of things that must be done in order to fight. Then finally, is the will of the people at various levels. So corruption is a very big, bad thing, it's very big, but because it is attractive to whoever is doing it, until there is a will to everybody to ensure that corruption is bad, let us fight it, then it is going to be very difficult to fight corruption the way we should.
Thank you. Julius, one of them was corruption, the other is debt.
Oh yeah.
When we look at the Attorney General's report, he says 96 trillion, about 52%. Government says it's about 86 trillion, 46%. They have to collect 31 trillion for the next financial year. About 23 trillion of that is just to debt. How do we get out of this vicious cycle that we seem to be rotating around? Because debt servicing is now a priority also in the budgeting.
Yes, and I mean, I was just thinking of how to help my brother here to shift from 34% to
At least 45.
Maybe it can go up, and I think that's number one. That the fiscal space has narrowed down. That there is no room for government to deal with any extra investment because debt is now the number one priority for the country, not to ensure that we pay. As of last year, 30th June, we were at 96%. But I believe that by the end of this year, we have hit 100 trillion figure, really. If you calculate the supplementary budgets that are coming up, which I suppose we are going to borrow money for that, and the amount of money we had to put in the current budget for borrowing, it's not above that. So there's no debate about it. So in order to ensure that we have debt sustainability, one of the things we need to do is to reduce on public expenditure, especially on areas that are wasteful. If you look at the 300 RDCs, for example, I mean,
assistant RDCs.
Couldn't we have said, please, volunteers come and mobilize for us votes? So it really tells you, and let me tell you, that is going to have pressure on debt, because right now is that if you don't have salaries or a non-wage commitments, including these RDCs, you are likely to go to the domestic market and collect and borrow money. And the challenge with the debt now is that it has two elements. One is that it is killing the very foundation that you are trying to build to promote economic growth, and that is the private sector. Because you are now going to ask for around 4 trillion in the domestic market. And which bank is going to give me money or you money other than the government? Because I'm at high risk, you're at high risk. Government, they will know they will pay. So, and when they do that, then they have reduced the amount of money that these banks would have given to the private sector. So you have a private sector competing with government to get money. So they're completely being crowded out. But the same private sector, you want them to pay taxes. So where would they get the money if they're not being productive? So if we want to improve performance, we need to deal with the issue of debt sustainability. Number one, ensuring that these non-concessional loans, especially these commercial papers, we need to get out of that one. Improve our absorption capacity. Actually, I was saying we shouldn't have borrowed. Rather, we should have worked hard to get these undisbursed loans, the 14.4 trillion I was talking about. Let it first come to the economy before we even go to borrow for more money. But also, let's deal with wastage. A friend of mine he usually tried to give a scenario. He said, how many cars do we have in this government? He said, each car can actually be a health center. So if we are very focused and say, this is what we want to do, I can tell you, we can be able to do it if we change our priorities. So that must be done. The second important item, I think, for me, really, Timothy, is we need finance markets. Because you see, in this country, I wonder why we are bothering Kenyans. Because if I put myself in my shoes as a Kenyan, would I really want government to come and dump their cheap products in my market? And my farmers really suffer to sell their products? Definitely not. I can't do that if I was a Kenyan. I will try all the means to frustrate you and frustrate your market. But is Kenya the only market that we can sell to? So government has failed to invest in marketing our products. If today, we know that there is a market for squared watermelons, we wouldn't be in this studio. All of us would be in our villages trying to grow squared watermelons for export because there is market. Because every human being is driven by incentive. You heard the story of the vanilla. Everybody was going for vanilla until it started losing market and people left it. Because there was that drive, that incentive. So government must deliberately look for markets. And for my friend here, the money you have put in PDM, I can tell you more than 90% of these people are going to grow crops and raise animals. Where are you going to sell these products? In the next financial, if they don't get money out of what they have produced, they will stop producing those. Completely, they will stop it. So you need to invest in that and encourage people, giving them that incentive so they can keep on producing and pay back your money by the way, because they need to pay back that particular money. The other element I think we touched about is around liberalization. We liberalized and forgot about regulation.
Exactly.
And for those who have traveled, the moment you step out of New York, JFK Airport, you will see the hand of government in regulation. The taxi, they will say, the state of New York, these are the fares. For the first kilometer, $5. For the next 20 and a half, $10. That is the state regulating. Get out of Entebbe Airport, and that's the smallest part, the lowest part. Prices are being regulated by the private sector, the taxi people. They are the ones who put the chart there. They say from here to Kampala is 60,000. It's the private sector. So anytime they can change the way they want it. So government has stepped back too much. They sold everything, and now they're not even regulating it. So government needs to get back, start regulating, start inspections. All these private schools, really, if you don't inspect them, then the quality of education is going to fall. And for me, with education, there is something that has been bothering me, Timothy. When you have 5 million children enrolled, and at the end of the day, you have 300 who at P7, where have the rest gone? I'm beginning to believe that, you see, when you have capitation grant based on each child, the school is going to inflate the number of children from P1 up to P6. But you cannot inflate children at P7 because your NAB requires you that each kid must register and attend the exam personally. So the numbers now disappear. So we need to go back and look at these enrollment rates that people are telling us about, and maybe we'd also do like how we did a payroll audit, and we count these children and see actually if they are there, because I have a belief these children are not there.
They could have been inflated.
Because I think these enrollment numbers are actually inflated. Because for the last 10, 20 years, where would these children be if you have not set exams? Okay, they have died, fine.
There was an incentive for falsification because the amount of money remitted to the schools depended on the number of registered.
That's the capitation grant I'm talking about. That if you have 20 children, you get 20,000. You get 200,000. If you have 1 million, I mean, the amount of money also increases. So that, I think the Ministry of Education and Finance need also to begin to examine these numbers again. Can we have a census on our children? How many are in primary schools?
Next week.
And I will do that. Lastly is, I think we need to, government need to be responsible and pay back to its suppliers. It is very embarrassing that people supply you. The private sector, whom we want to say, we need a strong private sector. Someone has struggled, they have sold their goods and land, they have got a smaller contract with you, they have supplied you with the Porsche and beans, with the stationery, and it takes you 10 years to pay them back. Do you think they will still be alive? You have a domestic areas of around 4 trillion, but on an annual basis you only budget for 200 billion. That is insane.
Thank you very much. Bashasha, let me come to you. You gave a plethora of challenges you have, from corruption to debt to high cost of business to land acquisition. How do you manage? How are you going to mitigate these challenges you put down?
These are observable challenges, and this report doesn't stop here. I think it will be going to the relevant authorities. The party in power must look at it and know that these are the challenges we have ahead of our success journey. Like the issue of acquisition of land, most of these projects are heavy projects. They need right of ways, whether it's water, whether it's roads, railway, or electricity. And constitutionally, land is owned privately here. So you'll find that this acquisition impacts the project in many ways. One of them is the cost of land itself, the compensation involved. 2 is the time taken through the procurement process. So all these impact negatively on the lead times for these projects to be delivered, and that can also be a breeding ground for corruption. So I think it's high time that the Constitution is reviewed on that matter, or the laws that govern the land acquisition are looked into for purposes of helping how government can acquire land very fast to make sure development is done. People have been talking about how projects move faster in our neighboring countries. Most of the neighboring countries' land is still government-owned, state-run. So it's very easy, and that's why even at the end of the day, if you look at the cost of delivering, say, we are talking about the kilometer generation of power, electricity. At the end of the day, these tariffs are transactional values along the whole implementation chain, starting with the cost. And I think land has been very, very instrumental in also forming part of the end tariffs. So the areas we have talked about, they are known. These are not things that are talked out of the that are kept in the cupboard. Everybody knows here that corruption is very prevalent. It is something we need to fight. My view is that we don't need to use this finger point approach of saying, you know, it is His Excellency, it is who has failed. I think all of us as Ugandans, we have failed on that front line of fighting corruption. It's high time each of us says, what is my role that I can do as far as that monster is concerned. So, moving forward, I think as technocrats who are in charge of the planning and execution, it's high time. Some of the issues have been talked about. You know, we have constrained resource base. The fiscal space has narrowed, as they observe. So we need to liberate that area. How do we create more resources available for these projects? How do we become more financially disciplined to make sure that whatever we release is put into the real execution of the project? Then at the end of the day, we are able to realize what we are witnessing. So largely these are software challenges which can really be managed. I just wanted to comment on that. People have been talking about this 38-year journey and what we have been done, but we also need to appreciate, out of these 38 years, what are the productive years of this government in terms of being serious with work? Most of the years were involved in dealing with other issues that were affecting the development of the country. And I'm glad that now that we are witnessing some level of stability and growth, we can now sit and reflect and say, yes, how do we now move the country forward? Some of these are, these policies were proposed, are they still working? You know, the whole global thinking has been that government should play less role in the business of doing things. But now we are witnessing that the government leaving business to private sector in itself may not be a solution as the thinking of the past years. So we, as a country, we can also sit back and reflect on the strategic direction and say, okay, moving forward, how do we, which policies are still applicable strategically, which are not applicable, and then we move to see how the country grows.
Thank you very much. The last few minutes, I'll give them to Andrew and Professor. Andrew, something you hinted on, especially in foreign direct investment there, especially with this handshake of foreign investment, which seems to leave the hand and reaching the elbow. How far should foreign investment reach, and how can we raise local capital? And these long-term projects, that's the first question. The long-term projects, roads, railways, dams, electricity, what should inform them? Isn't it putting the cart before the horse, then we put the project, then we have excesses of power? What should inform them to enhance economic development?
Who said we have excess of power? First of all, Uganda is going to run out of electricity in 2 to 3 years. We don't have enough electricity. If you look at, if Karuma Fule comes on board, it has 600 megawatts. Right now we have about 1,300 something. We'll have about 1,900 megawatts.
Yeah.
Our current peak consumption is maybe about
800 to 1,000.
let's say 930 by end of this year, or 950. And we have electricity growing at 10%. Karuma, although it has a capacity of 600, the maximum you can get out of it is 400 at a particular time. Because remember that if you put all the turbines to run, at 600 you run out of water. So Uganda will have a maximum capacity of about 1,400, 1,500. Not even that, less than that. Maybe 1,300, 1,400 megawatts of electricity. So in the next 3-4 years, Uganda will not have electricity, I can tell you. So again, you should ask yourself, how long does it take for Uganda to imagine a project, do feasibility studies, do the tendering process, construct the project and finish it. What is the average time? Jagali took about 20 years, Karuma took about 18 years. It takes so long. In fact, the fact that Uganda has not progressed on Ayago and other projects should tell you that we are going to be in the South African situation of acute energy shortages in the next 3, 4, 5 years. We'll be back to load shedding. Because the economy is growing very fast, but our ability to deliver on a project is very low. In 2015, when Alan Kajin had just been appointed the executive director of UNRA, Uganda National Roads Authority, she invited me to be the chair of the investor conference on the Jinja Kampala Expressway. Jinja Kampala Expressway is so important because it's our gateway to the coast. The idea was that the construction, the procurement will be done, construction will be commenced in 2019 and be finished in 2024. We are in 2024, in the middle of 2024, they have not even done the tendering. It has taken us 2 years to just deal with this partial guarantee that the ADB and the contractor were asking. You remember that we have a multilateral guarantee from ADB to the investor in the road, but then ADB said, okay, if Uganda, the guy collects the road toll and gives it to government. If government fails to release the money, ADB will pay him. That's the guarantee they gave. So ADB wanted to say, okay, if you Uganda don't give this guy money and we pay him, it should automatically become a loan on your book because you're not doing with charity. So that's the multilateral guarantee, which required a partial guarantee from government of Uganda. It has taken 2 years. If I'm not mistaken, up to now, it went to cabinet, it went to all, it has not yet been done. So if the rate of execution of projects is that slow, we were talking of the standard gauge railway. I remember in 2014, it's now 10 years later, we have just recently signed something with the Turkish company to build the standard gauge railway. But 10 years, the Kenyans built theirs, they have moved on, the Tanzanians have built theirs. So project implementation in Uganda is so slow, and I wonder what we can do. The other thing, of course, is you are talking of these projects. Projects in Uganda are largely driven by politics rather than by economics. For example, 65% of Uganda's GDP is produced in Kampala and Wakiso district. 75% of total revenue collection is collected in Kampala and Wakiso district, the surrounding Wakiso district. Yeah. But if you look at Uganda's budget for this financial year that is ending, roads in Kampala were allocated 1% of the road infrastructure, because UNRWA was given a budget of 4 trillion, Kampala was given 40 billion. 1%. So where you produce 65% of your GDP and 75% of the taxes, you allocate its infrastructure 1%. I mean, sometimes I sit, I wonder, because the people who make these decisions are percentage constituencies in Karamoja, where the president got 95%, in Kisoro, wherever it is. So they build roads there. The most productive part of Uganda's economy is in Kampala. The most skilled and productive citizens are in Kampala. 2 hours in the morning they're in traffic jam. 2 hours in the evening they're in traffic jam. So you have lost 4 man-hours every day to traffic jam. Output, 2. Then potholes have broken their cars. So they spend time in garages supervising their cars being repaired, because if they leave it there, the parts will be stolen. So that's time also lost. 3, they got office when they are exhausted and stressed. Remember that a highly skilled person requires to work in an environment where their brain, their skill can be optimally tapped. They cannot work when they are stressed. So you have less productivity there. And then finally comes the issue of spare parts. If you're permanently buying spare parts, you are shipping your money to Japan and impoverishing yourself. So if you are a decision maker in Uganda, even a stupid one, you just have to fix roads in Kampala in order to get your economy going. I every day wonder, why hasn't Uganda thought about it? It doesn't seem to be like rocket science. Even a good student of commerce in S4 would see the importance of it. The president the other day saw him driving. 40 years you have been in power, 40 years for Christ's sake. And you have a city, I was today, drove through industrial area. It's like Mogadishu has better roads than Kampala. Bangui, after 30 years of civil war, is better off. DRC, after 60 years of an absentee government, this is a disaster. So the fact that Uganda has been, because you see, the government of Uganda, Dombo, he built very good roads. But the rate of return on a road is determined by the volume of traffic on the road. In Kampala, you have 10,000 cars per day on a road. In Karamoja, you have 10 cars per day on a road. Where do you build your infrastructure? If you want to do roads in Karamoja, build the ones in Kampala, increase your productivity, drive up your revenue, GDP growth and your revenue growth, then you can finance other areas. For us, we are financing politics, we are not financing the economics. We are not putting our money where our mouth is. That is a serious. I should tell you, this country is so politicized. Politicized to a degree that is self-destructive.
Okay.
Now, the final one, of course, that the if a person was in the government of Uganda thinking is, at what point does government of Uganda remove bottlenecks for me and you to be able to invest and invest productively? I have already told you the issue of courts, but just imagine me, I'm a businessman. Even before the president talks of improving my, what do you call it, my electricity bill, what are my transport costs? If I have a container of goods stuck on Ginger Road, you know Ginger Road is our gateway to the sea. Has any one of you driven to Ginger? It can take you 1 year to drive from Kampala to Ginger.
Yeah.
So if you are transporting your goods, you're stuck there.
Then you do the
For a whole week.
Kalaji, 47 kilometers
Yes.
extra.
To drive from Mukono to Kampala. I mean, these are the things we should be talking about. How do we make it easier for especially now goods to be transported in order for you to increase? By the way, I should tell you, if you go into manufacturing is a very complex idea, but the best way. You see, in manufacturing, it is easier to increase the productivity of labor through skilling them. And therefore, the space for productivity growth, you know what I mean by productivity? Output per unit factor input. In this case, output per unit labor input. How much does each worker produce? If I come here tonight and I work in a factory producing these cups, within each hour, how many cups do I produce per hour? She produces 5, I produce 10, I'm twice more productive than her.
Yeah,
so if you're talking about productivity growth is, 52% of Uganda's GDP is in services. So our economy is shaped like an industrial, an advanced economy, not a growing economy. A growing economy will be powered by manufacturing, where there is a lot of space for productivity growth. The service sector has limited possibilities for productivity growth. Why? Let me give you an example. Assuming you are a teacher, how can we increase your productivity? Either we must increase the size of the class, which reduces the quality of teaching. So in 1 hour you can teach more students, but the more students you pack into a class, the less the quality of teaching. Or we must lengthen the time you teach, in which case you get exhausted and therefore can't teach well. So there is limits to how much productivity you can increase for services. If you are a border rider, how do we increase your productivity? By increasing speed, which may lead to an accident. If you are a surgeon, how many people can you operate on? You see, if you try to increase the number of people a guy can operate on, you're likely to forget to make mistakes and people die. So services always have limited productivity growth. And in an economy like this, where growth must be driven by improvements in productivity, if you get a man from a hoe and put him on a plow, his productivity grows. Then you put him on a tractor. Then you can put him on even a more advanced tractor. Then you go into a combine harvester. There are so many technological things you can do. Even in a factory, there are so many. The space for productivity growth is very high. So I come to Uganda, you are a poor economy, 52% of your GDP is in services, and these services have limited space for productivity growth. How then are you going to leapfrog and catch up with the industrialized countries?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Finally, Professor, how and why should Ugandans be hopeful, especially between now and the end of this manifesto?
How and why should they be hopeful? Well, it's a very hard paper, but anyway, we'll try. Just one thing I wanted to comment on the issue of land. I think the whole issue that has put up the cost of land for acquisition for government projects is the whole fragmentation in the process. You have a project zoning out the area it wants to get. Then while they have documented the people who are on that land, they tell you it's Ministry of Lands, which will then come and verify and give the bill to Ministry of Finance. And if it goes to Ministry of Finance and it's a non-priority for that year, people will take longer to be compensated. So then that makes people to resist government acquisition of land instead of actually embracing it as a project that's going to benefit. Then, of course, there's another problem at the districts. there's always a variation between what government actually requires from Kampala and what the district leaders are stating as what government requires. And so, to many people, some of the government projects have also become vehicles at local level for also land grabbing. So that's another thing that has to be looked into. And when you cross-check with government, you actually get variation in figures. Government's talking of a lower acreage, the community is talking of a larger acreage. But anyway, you said, how do we go back to increasing this performance within the remaining years? As I've said before, I think there are those areas that have to be looked into, but mainly, I know Andrew has talked a lot about the macroeconomic level of things. If we had to focus on the micro level kind of things, I think the government has to strengthen the whole issue of household incomes, addressing livelihoods, and as I've said, not just by throwing money to them, but by giving them proper ventures. You know, we may be celebrating the number of jobs created in the micro sector because people are able to do things. But you remember the monitor of 15th April, which reported actually 70% of Ugandans are living beyond what they earn. They are surviving by borrowing. They are surviving by, they borrow from friends, they borrow from families, they just don't have money. And you're talking about 17.2 million of the adult population out of 24.6 billion. So you actually have an adult population which is dependent, okay? And when you talk to some people who have some income are even supporting whole families. So we have a real problem. So that's why strategies to increase household incomes are important. And these incomes increase should be meaningful enough so that people stop borrowing and surviving on others. Otherwise, whoever has a job is not just looking after their family, but is carrying 5 other families, and that becomes a challenge. And there are simple things we can do with regard to increasing household incomes. People talked about, of course, there's the PDM thing, but people also talked about a few basics of agro-industrialization processes. First of all, finding markets for these goods. I know communities could be producing the same thing, but is there a market for those things outside? I remember there was a time people in the East were dying of famine years ago, but people in the West were dumping maize, particularly areas of Chenjojo, whatever, those maize growing areas there. So we need the country to speak to each other. What does one area have, which another area might need, and vice versa. So that is one thing you can do. But also there are small things we can put in place for value addition. Why should people farm tomatoes and dump all of them? And yet in this country we also have factories by Ugandans that are actually producing ketchup and all that kind of thing. So this is something which would require some limited skilling and people learn what to do, or the other factories given incentives to buy more, whatever the product is. We have a lot of our maize going to aflatoxins. That requires people to just be taught a few skills on how to process. Don't dry it down, maybe make a wire mesh bed of it with small netting, and then they will do that. And I think they are within the 1 year, then the skilling program, the presidential skilling programs will have to come in place so that they actually work at the level of household income, even as we think of growing bigger. So personally, I'm a bit hopeful.
Thank you. Let me read just 4 messages so that we can call it a day. Dear panelists and Ugandans, the issue of skilling or skilling of the population is very vital. It's about universities. It's not about universities. It's about tertiary, such as colleges, certification, diploma studies, polytechnics, equipping everyone. The skills sometimes need juakali in the cities, and this has proven to be a huge employer and not universities. This is Lokomoro from Moroto there. Yeah. And this other one, good evening panelists, this is Musa from Busika. My challenge is seeing poor health sectors in the 21st centuries. You say the future is secure. I went to Soroti Regional Hospital for medical checkup and that time, but could not find help because of lack of medical equipment to be used to handle the medical checkups, okay? Someone else says, was the discussion on sanitary pads for our daughters a joke or an aspiration? Very interesting there. Finally, Professor is spot on regarding the systematic collection and monitoring and evaluation of the PDM implementation. Lack of robust M&E systems in PDM is causing the problem. This is Constantine in Kampala. Andrew needs to note that the enterprise selected by the beneficiaries are deprived from parish development model. And then I have two that comment about Andrew. They just say, we're really grateful for Andrew's submission today. It's really spot on, and we thank him for the factual part there. And finally, Andrew has made a lot of sense today. Indeed, I do not think the silver bullet of PDM will do what is needed, especially with government. They need to reprioritize some of these. Peter from Iganga. A lot of messages have come through, and we're really grateful. But I'll get to my panel. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Andrew, for coming through. We appreciate. Abashasha, thank you very much. Julius, thank you very much. Honorable Dombo, thank you very much. We'll end it this way. It's not knowing that is difficult, but doing. Good morning.
Junko. Yo. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model, PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a poultry project, and now things are moving.
Junko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Based on investigations into alleged offences in Gaza which date back to 2014. This is during an earlier Netanyahu term. And just a reminder that the White House supported a warrant against Vladimir Putin. This was last year, saying that the ICC has the right to condemn the Russian president for the Ukraine conflict. Jerusalem Development Fund Chair Shami Sinjalawi says that Washington decides on issues of legitimacy through a lens that reflects its national interests.
Legitimacy has one definition in Washington, D.C. It's national interest. The whole world, the morality of the world is pending and measured on the national interest of the Americans. If they have national interest in something, it becomes legitimate. If